I'm Smitty. This week on Games You Deserve, I've been sending people blood-splattered bananas. Plus,
I'm Dan, and since real sports are canceled, we take a look at esports during the COVID-19 pandemic. Plus,
I'm Erik. We'll slap some imps around in the game of the week. It's kind of cool to see all these folks in the Discord that we've got getting their shipping notifications for that banana.
Oh, I know. It took a minute, with the pandemic stuff that slowed down all the global shipping. And as like when we're recording this right now, even it is, we have a lot of countries that have shipping that has just stopped. And so we're holding like all of their shipments for certain countries, Germany and Spain, not just, little tiny countries, but their list is big. But yeah, it is exciting to see finally that My Friend Pedro, the reserves with the reserve box and the lenticular cards made it out into people's hands. People have already been going crazy, about the new processes that we're using on the boxes and how we're preserving, and honoring the art a little bit more with the new and improved reserve game boxes.
what's the banana? What do they get? What kind of banana are they getting? The Pedro?
Oh, tell them, Erik. What's a banana?
I for those of you that aren't familiar with My Friend Pedro, Pedro is a friend. Pedro's a little floaty banana guy, and he tells you to do some crazy things. He's in your head. But in all seriousness, this really neat pack-in that we get with these reserves. And Smitty's sitting here flashing it to Dan right now. It's this great, like the stress balls. It's like that, but it's a banana shape. It's got the little Pedro face on there and the logo on the back. And it's got nice little blood splatter on there, which, by the way, every single banana is unique. None of the blood splatters are exactly the same, which is really cool.
Well, they were hand done. That's why.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
One at a time.
And there's some really cool ones out there where some people went a little nuts, and there's maybe a little more blood on some of them than others.
Oh, I showed that. It's this one. I showed this one on Discord, and I said, here was an example of overspray, and a couple of the guys really like that one. I said, there's only one. There's literally that one.
There's only one that's that bad.
Yeah, and we could randomly ship it out to somebody, but yeah, I'm sure.
I was thinking a lot about the box though, not just the banana, because there's some really, really nice processes for the blood that's on the box, right? Where it's an extra couple of layers there. And you can, if you put your hand on the box and touch it, you can feel the difference.
Erik, the technical term for that is
here we go.
Raised UV.
Raised UV.
And
don't I know it?
And might I say, on Pedro, we did multiple passes of raised UV. And so what UV is just a clear material. It's like glue. Imagine like Elmer's glue, if you will. It's like got almost that thick consistency. It'll stay where you put it, and it doesn't spread too much. But it literally is liquid. It's like a gloss, and so it accentuates all the color and everything that's underneath of the whatever it's on top of. But then you can actually give it its own shape. As you do multiple passes, you can build it up with 1 pass, 2 pass, 3 passes. It's kind of like, I don't know, Legos or something. They stack
like
on
3D
top
printing,
of each other,
like 3D printing. That's how that works.
It is 3D printing. It's 3D printing with this type of material. And then we can also add grit and textures, and like Hotline Miami. It has multiple processes on it. And one of them was grit UV, where we use different basically it's a lot of dots, little dot patterns. They're not physical dirt in this UV.
But you can feel that texture when you put your hands on it. Yeah. It's tactile. It's essentially tactile.
All of this is tactile, and so it's not just one process used over and over again. Like, Spot UV that came out in the late 90s on all of our game boxes, and everybody Spot UV'd their screenshots on all of the product boxes because it made them look cool. It's like, oh man, that's a neat shine or whatever.
Yeah, they pop. If you're at home and you want to print something out, even if you've got like a nice color inkjet, that thing's feeding a single sheet of paper through and it's laying all the ink down in one pass.
One pass.
That's not what's happening here with these boxes. Multiple passes these things are going through, and they're getting, layers and layers built onto them for these different processes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think we counted, like for Hotline Miami, I think if you really count the layers, we have like 7. I mean, because I'm also making my own paper. Don't forget, I had that one material that we were making boxes out of last year, and I just knew we could improve it maybe a little bit more, and the answer was just to make my own paper. So I'm laminating my own paper stock with this certain material, and that's our base layer to print on. And then we start with white layers, and then we do the art, and then we do all these other processes we're talking about, and then we do debossing and so the whole thing is there. Like you said, tactile. The word tactile is what it's all about for me in the physical world. Is like, how do we honor and preserve this digital art? And the stuff we do at Special Reserve Games is these. We're dedicated to kind of the old school way of presenting these games with a proper product box, a cool instruction booklet that's printed, and maybe a couple cool things like stickers or whatever, and keep it simple. And then just beautiful art and design of the packaging, and a great game inside.
But I think the end result, when you grab that as a collector and you put this thing up on your shelf, because I've got all of our boxes in the most prominent place in my collection that I'm sitting here, not the one behind me, but the one in front of me, and each box sitting right next to each other. And some of them look similar in the overall aesthetic, but of course all the artwork's different. But then we mix in these other designs, and some of that's coming with what we have right here in Pedro going out. And then Hotline Miami is going to kind of combine some other elements and bring some new stuff to everyone, which is going to look great. I mean, some of the proofs that we've seen from the early processes and the tests, just to find that, to kind of tune that in, as Smitty's saying, they're just amazing. Even the proofs are just amazing. So it's a great thing to see.
Yeah. And, in the end, all I'm trying to do in this business is, just get things that I would like to collect and, and whatever, but some of it feels handmade when it goes out, like that's not a bad thing. It used to be kind of when I was growing up, you wanted these, handmade was what your grandma gave you, or what your cheap uncle who didn't want to buy you a present, he made you something, and you wanted something from Kmart, for goodness sake, or Sears, and I was like, so you remember back in the day where handmade almost meant something different. And I think we went so far, the pendulum swung so far into the mass manufacturing type of idea that's why what we do, it's kind of funny to me how radical people think that we are in some of our approach. Like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing, thank you for doing this. I'm like, all I am doing, I'm telling you, is what I bought from Sears, and what I bought from the weird computer shop at the strip mall in Enid. Man, they were all handmade. I mean, handmade from the jump. And so like the packaging and all that, one of the guys on Discord, I had to be one of the Dogfathers, one of the OG, or well, not of the OGs, but the insider group. We're the OGs. But one of the Dogfathers mentioned that they really appreciated the handmade approach. Or it might have been one of the Pupper Chat guys. And they just said they appreciated the handmade feel or whatever these boxes. And I was like, man, I can think of no greater compliment for me personally as a designer or just a publisher or whatever, that I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going for. It shouldn't feel like it was made in mass. Felt like it was made by a few people who really cared about this art for you, and it's special. You do have a one of a kind. It's cool. It's a collectible.
Okay, we all know how much Cleveland loves Tecmo Bowl, so let's start playing. On the Raiders, I'm Bo Jackson, and hopefully he'll show up.
That's no fair. Bo Jackson's too fast.
Bye-bye.
See, Peter, he's too fast.
You gotta tackle me. It's B. You gotta press B.
I'm pressing B. He's too fast.
Change your guy, Quagmire. Change your guy.
I'm trying. Peter's cheating. You're cheating, Peter.
I'm not cheating. I'm following the rules. I'm just really good.
You're not really good. You just got Bo Jackson.
So now, of course, with the whole COVID-19 pandemic, sports has been canceled, like regular sports. And I know that you guys talked about, I remember back in, I think it was episode 1, you guys talked about playing Tecmo Bowl and the football games that you played when you were kids. Being a big part of it, right? You want to kind of recreate those games that you saw on TV. For me, of course, I'm in Canada, so it's hockey. Hockey is the sport of choice here. That's the only real. No, I mean we do other sports too, but hockey is the most popular one.
You got curling too, right?
We do have curling, yes, but I don't think there are any curling video games. I would love to see that.
There should be. Smitty, get on that.
No, there might be like, well, they do those Olympics games, like there's Sonic and Mario Olympics and stuff like that. There might be something, because curling is a winter Olympic sport. There might be that. I don't know. I'll try and figure that out. But yeah, so hockey's canceled. Very upset about it. I'd been going to, a lot of Jets games and stuff like that and having a great time. And so yesterday, I noticed on my lunch hour that our local team, the Winnipeg Jets, did a live stream of a video game. It was NHL 20. It was the current EA Sports version of the NHL series, and it was a game with the current roster of the team versus the alumni roster. So all the old legends, all the greatest players to ever play the game on the Jets. So it was old versus new, and it's a complete computer simulation. So there's nobody actually playing it. We were just watching a simulation, which is, I know.
They didn't even have one of the players playing it?
When you said simulation, I was like, I didn't know exactly what you meant, but now I'm like, oh, that sucks.
I know I didn't know though. At first I didn't know. I'm like, oh, we're watching this game. Maybe it's two of the top players in the team playing against each other or something like that. That would be fun. Yeah. And then the other thing I noticed but it had the video had 21,000 views or something, which isn't bad for a short-lived video like that. A lot of people I think are starved for that kind of content. They really want to watch hockey, so they'll watch that. The other thing I saw on the weekend is this NASCAR series. Have you guys seen these yet? Yep. These NASCAR ones they're doing, absolutely. And Indy racing as well is doing it, where they're simulating racing, and it's a bit different because the hockey game, even if it was people playing the hockey game, it's still one player versus one player. You're not getting a team of 5 players in one team, 5 players in another team. But for racing, they can actually pretty accurately simulate. That's right. The racing part of it, and the guy sitting, I saw the setup on this article, the guy sitting in a chair with a steering wheel, like Daytona. Remember Daytona you were talking about, Eric, back in episode 1, Daytona, that kind of a game, but super high tech.
Well, heck, I actually worked on kart precision racing. That's championship auto racing teams. That was the last game we did for Microsoft, and that was way more a simulation than a game. And we had Michael Blundell. And he was originally from England, but Michael Blundell was a racer for kart, and I think he went to F1 maybe, but it's absolutely. And what to your point about how it's easy for him to simulate for the driver, for NASCAR specifically, it's also very easy for them to simulate because the idea of NASCAR is we start you with the same engine. We start you with the very similar frame, and you can only use these kinds of tires. You can only use these types of things. So everybody kind of has a similar kit, and it's not so much how you put it all together. It's how you tune that kit, and then how your driver drives that kit.
Right.
And, so the NASCAR cars are all pretty much identical, to each other from their power, from what their core is. So that would be easy to simulate, that plus GPS positioning. Because the tracks don't move, the tracks stay static, and you can absolutely go and plot every square inch and every square centimeter of that track accurately, including probably bumps in the asphalt or whatever type of surface they have, And
then it's all about who can turn left more. Oh wait,
but man, I tell you what, I was gonna say every left turn just sounds like this. Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching.
That might be the case. I don't know. I'm not a huge racing guy, but if I if I am watching racing or if I am interested in that in some way, it's usually open wheel over NASCAR.
Well,
so
they're doing the same thing, though. The open wheel are doing the same thing, right? They had the same race.
Indy Circuit and F1, those are a little bit more interesting to me personally. And I like the idea of that, though, of taking the simulation and running those guys through the paces of that. But I think in that particular case, man, how cool would it be to kind of get yourself set up in a rig the way the old arcades had, where, you know, you're sitting inside of something with a wheel and pedals and all that sort of thing.
Brother, I have one of my friends that has one of those in his house, and he is an ex-NASCAR driver, and it's all on hydraulics and everything.
I mean some of those games also had like the resistance, you feel the resistance of the wheel as you turn in, and that kind of stuff, so it feels realistic. But the fun part is that they're like chirping with each other and like, you know, this back and forth. It doesn't really happen during a race because you can't talk to each other, so there's a little bit of fun stuff happening. One of the guys rage quit, apparently. He was so upset about a crash he rage quit and got out of there.
Real.
And they are getting legitimate drivers. Like Denny Hamlin was in this one. I don't remember who else. There was a couple of other racers.
These guys use those simulators as just like people who fly.
Yeah.
I mean, they used to use Microsoft Flight Sim. I mean,
right.
I live in my hometown. Shout out, had Vance Air Force Base, and they were a T-38. They still are a T-38 trainer base, and they train in T-37s. And they've always had a room full of simulators. You know, simulators have always been a thing for how long? So,
well, I mean, the military even uses simulators like constantly, and not just in flight. They do it for tanks. They do it for all kinds of different.
But let's talk about that. Why though? You know, the simulation is totally to fool our brain. It's totally to give us a more human experience.
Yeah.
Because I don't really know that it affects our performance in a game necessarily better, you know, because you're just playing the game with your eyes, you know, you're not really feeling the inertia and everything like that. Your life's not really on the line.
Although I gotta say, you know, if you can really get into it, you know, some of those simulators, you talked about Microsoft Flight Simulator, man, those guys get down to if you really want, you can get the dashboard of that commercial plane with every single knob, every single lead, like they can really get deep.
What happened? I got bubbled. Well, there's that. Man, this is worse than real life. These guys forget his 150 lap race. Come on, Bubba! Stupid thing.
I'll give all the credit to a guy named Rich Harvey, who's no longer with us, from Terminal Reality, and he spearheaded programming a KLN 89 GPS by Bendix King when we did Fly, a general aviation flight simulator on par with, you know, Microsoft Flight Sim, and to program a GPS, which that wasn't a visual GPS back in the day. It was all based on radio pings, and, you know, that's how you figured out your positioning by how far away you were from certain radio towers and whatnot. And visual identification was a dream. But so yeah, that was to be able to program and do all that kind of detail. People who fly and people who drive, you know, they love the machines and they love the performance of those machines. And so I think that's the one thing, like when you get into the esports side of the gaming, how, you know, it is kind of funny to say, oh, NASCAR, esports, that's not a real deal. Well, it is, because they are tuned in on their game. Just like if you were playing Call of Duty Warzone, your loadouts for your custom guns and stuff that you earn get different unlocks for, you know, a special grip or a special muzzle brake or a special, you know, sight or a laser. And so you, quote, tune in your machine to, you know, so you can have the best performance with it. And I think that's the same thing that can be applied to, say, the NASCAR style of esport racing, because you can do the same thing, and it's actually pretty representative of the physical world.
Yeah, of course, and you want to get into it, but the one thing I would say that's probably different as far as the NASCAR stuff goes is you can take more risks, because you know you're not going to die if you crash. Like, there's that, right? When you're really racing and you crash, there's a good chance you could die, although they're safe, but there's always that chance. But when you're doing it in a simulator, you know that's not going to happen. So there's a part of your brain that knows that it's not real, even though it might feel real. But what blew me away about it was the realism of what it looked like. Like it was on this, like, I don't even know why I still have sports channels right now. I should just cancel them all because there's nothing. All they're doing is showing old reruns of like old games from the 80s. I came across this and I'm like, what is this, like an old race or something? It was new and it looked real. Like it just looked like a real race. And the only thing that looked weird is that when they stopped a pit, all the cars were like raising and lowering with like their tires are being changed, but there was nobody there changing the tires. Like none of that was happening. But they still simulate that tire wear and all the other stuff that happens during a race as well. So you do have to pit, you do have to stop and refuel and that kind of stuff, which is really cool. But yeah, it looked super real.
Imagine how cool that is for the game developers to be able to watch something like that with, I was thinking about the racing one. If they turn around and watch the behaviors of the drivers doing this in the Sims and take that feedback and roll that into that next game, right? I mean, this is what you're talking about, an event like this with multiple drivers doing this live in a simulator is not something they can always pull off. You know, they can get drivers and they can go do that, but to have a bunch of professional like a whole host of professional drivers doing it at the same time and pulling that data in live together, that's a great experience, a great opportunity for them to learn some stuff and roll that into the next game.
Well, you've never built a whole season around that. You might have built a game around that, but you haven't, like the whole idea of battle royale and, and all this has brought a whole different idea to multiplayer gaming. It used to just be, Quake and, another thing, back in the day.
Love those.
I love them, but it was a different style. Like I'm super deep into Warzone, I play it every single night. And, but the thing about the competition that you could look at with, a NASCAR that has a real world representative where I know so does Call of Duty, but we're not
a little different.
Yeah, just a little different. But so the NASCAR thing you could actually compare if you go back to the idea I was talking about how in the real world, the real cars do have the same basic specs, and then and we know by GPS positioning or where the cars would be on any track at any given time. What you could do is you could be able to synchronize real world racing with Esports Simulator, and you would be able to have people on the PC or a console queued up. You could download all the tracks that they're going to race. We're all racing the same track. We all have quote unquote the same engine in the same car with the same type of performance. It all comes down to driver, skill. And then you could technically be able to race in a virtual space against real world drivers in real time as they were really racing the real tracks. Because when they start, you start. Everybody's synced. And you know where they are at all times on the track, and and then you would almost be able to see them. And if you really wanted to freak the drivers out, you could give them a heads up display while they're racing that they could actually see digital racers, virtual racers, esports. So there's a few ways that I think that esports could actually bridge a few real world sports with digital, virtual sports, and actually let them create a new sport.
So what about games like League of Legends or Dota or these other kind of more fantastic games that are not as grounded in reality as what you've been talking about?
We're going to have to find some dragons then. I mean, there's no other answer.
No, but it's certainly, it makes a case for the old argument that esports aren't real sports. People always, get into the physical nature of it. A sport is something that takes physical effort, which, arguably.
You ever see StarCraft? Well, you ever see these players play StarCraft?
No, I know. Yeah, that's right.
Don't tell me that ain't a sport.
I've got my Space Force t-shirt.
That's right.
Right. That's the thing. Like it's as much mental as it is physical, and it is about coordination, and it is about reaction time and reflexes, and all that stuff plays into it. So
their heart is racing, man. Their blood is pumping, their adrenaline is kicking through. Just because they're physically sitting down doesn't necessarily mean anything. So's the driver in a race car, and you ever see him at the end of that? You know how emotionally and physically worn out they are at the end of something like that, and they're sitting down, they're turning a wheel, but They're not running. They're not, taking a jog, but it's still a sport. They're exerted,
Thank God you said that. I was getting ready to say, we're going to have some real angry people.
That's exactly where I'm going with it, though, is it's just as exerting. They're putting their body through the physical paces. I kind of liken this, and I'm going to make an equivalent argument here to what you're talking about with something like LOL or Fortnite or whatever. Poker tournaments. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but if you are sitting there and you realize how difficult it is to put your real money or the chance of some serious money on the line when you are, heads up with somebody on a set of cards, and you got to make that decision to push in or not, and you don't know if you're going to walk away with that money or not. That gets your adrenaline pumping, and hours of that is also draining.
Well, that was the joke when all this started out, and they canceled the NBA system, canceled all the NHL season, and all the sports stopped. Was that, I guess all these networks are going to show poker 24 hours a day.
We've got like 5 channels that are all dedicated to poker. That they did that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
No, I know. There's still that as well. I mean, they are hurting for content right now, which is probably part of the reason why they did this. But it certainly is more exciting to have real people involved than it is to do I thought the thing with the hockey game was it was fine, but it was like, get real people involved. Otherwise, don't bother.
Why not have the players actually play that?
They say they're going to, I made that comment on the stream, and they said we're going to work on that.
They've done it with the NBA. The NFL does this, and they're more like novelty, things. They haven't ever really coalesced around the idea that like Dak Prescott is actually going to play Dak Prescott.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's a concept. And then don't you think that might be it might be beautiful for esports, because then you might have pro athletes and everything getting so in depth with these that each and every player might actually have an absolutely real world facsimile, if you will.
I mean, they're getting close, right? A lot of those sports, they bring in all the stats, and the player is very close.
Every player and record. I mean, I know they're doing that for motion, for graphical reasons, and I'm sure they do some for performance reasons.
Come on, big ball.
This episode brought to you by Fetch. Give the gift of play.
Fetch is a game for dogs. What is it? It's a ball. We have large and small, depending on your dog's preference or maybe their physical size. But while everyone is sheltering in place and hanging out with some social distancing, your dog is going through this too. So your dog might want a little game to play, and heck, you might want a game to play with your dog. So how about a fun, safe, slightly minty taste ball?
Do you know that personally? Have you checked that out and tested that?
Yeah, the ball does have a minty smell, and it does have a slight minty flavor. Hey, if my dog was going to chew on it, and I love my dog, I at least had to taste it once, right, just to see. But Fetch is on sale currently at specialreservegames.com. If you buy a game of Fetch for $20, and that includes free shipping in the United States, we at Special Reserve will match that ball, giving one to another dog, a dog that's in need, a dog that's in a shelter that's been rescued. We work with an organization called Street Dog Project here in Dallas, Texas, where they rescue dogs that are in dire physical need, and then they rehab them and help get them fostered and hopefully eventually adopted out. So every single time someone buys a game of Fetch for $20, you get a ball, and a dog that's homeless, in dire physical need, that's being fostered and sheltered, also gets a ball. So why not give a game of Fetch today? Go to specialreservegames.com, buy a game of Fetch or 2 for your dog, and share the gift of play.
And you're right, this is minty.
Since you're talking about poker too, and sports of all kind, then we can also talk about the gambling side of things, because esports, there's a ginormous world of gambling, like Las Vegas gambling around esports for games like Overwatch. And
really? What do you think of that, though? I'm curious what your take is.
Well, Well, number one, anything that I've always kind of never trusted, the games, right? I always think, is this game cheating me? And it wasn't until, he started making the games that he really realized it might not be cheating you, but there might be a bug. There might be a little small bug. They exist. And out of millions of lines of code, there might be something off. But so, it's hard to believe that you could rely 100% on a digital game being flawless and being completely based on player skill versus player skill.
True.
Like, let's just say I don't know, freaking something wrong with the CPU and I had a millisecond delay, whatever. I just don't know. So yeah, there's a couple of things that are different than real world sports betting, but real world sports betting, you have way more of a negative influence, for people who are really trying to, people can be swayed. Machines, no, you can't use emotional baggage on a machine most of the time to get it to do what you want.
Have you ever placed a wager on an esports event?
Never. But I was just having a conversation. I was having a conversation with a guy about esports betting, and they had developed an algorithm that allows for a more accurate point spread or bet prediction for the casino side. And so they could offer better odds, more accurate odds. Now, of course, the house always wins. They want those odds to be in their favor, of course. But this was a serious conversation with a very serious guy, and they were already talking with a very serious casino in Las Vegas about this very thing, about more accurately giving bets out, or offering different lines for esports. So they are trying to figure it out. So I think my answer is it's in its infancy. We're going to see what it really does. But I don't think that I've never really liked gambling.
I'm not a huge fan either, but if you've ever gone to Vegas and you've seen their slot machines are basically just video games now.
Oh yeah.
Like if you look at those big digital slot machines, I went there and I found a Star Wars one and I couldn't get away from it because it was so freaking cool.
Was it the one that had the Death Star on the top that spun around?
I think so. And it was
because that's an amazing, I've played a couple of those, and that was an amazing game for a slot machine.
I made that game. You'll never win. I got all your money.
Of course you'll never win.
But I think honestly, this is I don't think they exist anymore. It's I'm pretty sure this was pre-Disney Star Wars. I don't think Disney allows the Star Wars brand to be used in gambling, but before that they did, and it was just a lot of fun just to see. You get to the bonus and you choose the droids and do all these things on the screen. It's a touch screen, and it's all digital. There's no like back when these were still physical slot machines where you pulled the lever of the thing. It was all kind of clockwork. They had a way to make sure it was random every time. Now it's random by program.
Isn't that weird? Isn't that weird how all of this stuff is converged, right? What you're talking about, you're bringing in things, you're taking video games, you're taking sports, you're taking gambling, and all of these things are now kind of coming together, right? And it's all converged into just one giant industry. I mean, look how many people look at Konami and what Konami has done over the years with their properties. They're more of a gambling company than they are a video game company now. And Konami's got some amazing properties. Yeah, a lot of their stuff goes into these gambling machines overseas, and they take their properties and stick them on there, and they make a ton more money doing that than they ever did on video games.
For people who aren't familiar, look them up. They're like literally pennies and nickels and dimes. Like you're not sitting there betting dollars.
No,
like they're these little penny machines, and they're everywhere. They have little arcades that are just little gambling machines, just stuck over right next to the machine that gives you any kind of food out of a machine that you want.
And you can win some real money out of those things in some of the spots. But I mean, it's just, to me, I just find it fascinating how all of that stuff has kind of come in together into its own thing, and it's converged into one major part of the industry. So.
Well, but gambling on sports of any kind, I think, was not necessarily just a way to make money and it's all about capitalism. I think it was a way for other people to get another kind of thrill and excitement out of sports. It's like another layer of sports. Some guys really could care less. They don't know any of the teams. They could care less. They just know stats. Some guys love the Dallas Cowboys and only bet on the Dallas Cowboys, and that's cool, and then some people play. So there's all kinds of, but I just think it's an excitement level. It adds another level to the game of sports for some people. Well, what the difference is between esports and say the NFL versus like, let's say Fortnite players, that are competing, that the NFL only, half of 1% of 1% of the 1% of 1% of people that even ever play football in their life would ever end up in the NFL. But Fortnite, if you got $40, you're playing. Well, hell, it's free. But I mean, if you got $40, you're doing, your packs and you're getting extra guns. But you don't even, the barrier of entry to be a esports player is much, much lower. And I'm not discounting it. I'm just saying the opportunity is much wider and more open for esports players to engage and practice and try to get better. And one thing about esports is if you practice, you can get better. But let's say in the NFL, it doesn't matter how much you work out, you're not going to grow 6 inches tall or 6 inches taller, or 8 inches taller or run 2 miles, in 3 minutes. You're never going to do those things because gravity.
Right.
and other things like that. But I mean, some people are physical specimens that they can do that.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm just saying. Esports, I think, gives a greater opportunity for people to be competitive if they want to be competitive in this. And I think that might maybe decrease some of the onus on mimicking exactly what professional sports are, with the whole thing about betting all around it, the types of sponsors that sponsor it, the way that events are broadcast and shown, because we've already changed that with Twitch and Mixer. We've already changed how competitive esports are even broadcast, and I think it's great because I feel like the video game industry maybe has a little tighter grasp on all of our products and everything like that and how they're marketed, because we just will not tolerate misinterpretation of our artwork and stuff. I've seen it before. I was a developer. I'm a publisher now. And I have, Eric, I have many conversations where I was like, oh yeah, you're not going to do that? Well, then we're not doing it. It's over. Thank you. We're out. Bye. Next. There's no room.
Right.
And so unlike most other industries, in the video game business, when you own an intellectual property, you can actually throw down the gauntlet and say no. And that's your negotiating tactic,
Yeah, you can walk away, certainly. I think one of the things that I find really interesting about this portion of it here, though, is the way that the fans feel so much closer to this than they do real sports. I mean, even if let's just say you grew up and you played football in high school, and maybe even you played football in college, let's just say you went so far to do that. You probably knew there was still not a snowball's chance in hell that you were going to make it into the pros, because it's 1% of 1% of 1% that even gets there. And then it's another one. Yeah. And then it's another 1% of that even makes it on the field. So,
and then can I cut in and tell you something? I talked to an offensive lineman from the NFL, and you know what the average life expectancy of an NFL lineman is in the NFL?
Oh, just a few years, if that.
18 months.
Yeah.
Boom.
Wow.
It's crazy. Guess what the minimum qualification is to the non-profit, non-tax-paying NFL? Guess what the minimum qualification is in years played to get to be able to get long-term medical coverage? Do you think it's 3 years? It is.
Yeah. Beyond, beyond the threshold.
Do you think it's 24 months,
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you're right.
And it's amazing how that lines up. But in esports, like you said, the barrier to entry is that much lower, right? Because a fan can pick up a mouse and a keyboard and a computer that's halfway decent, plug into their favorite kind of game, and it doesn't have to be League of Legends. It doesn't have to be NASCAR type stuff. It doesn't have to be what it can be. Almost any type of game now that's competitive.
Yep.
And boom, off to the races they go. And if they spend a little time and get good, they can register for a tournament and hell, hit it big, become, the next ninja.
Brother, I'm watching an Age of Empires 2 tournament on Twitch Rivals channel for the last 2 weekends.
Yeah.
Age of Empires 2. You know what I'm saying? This is not, you don't have to be a first person shooter lover. I mean,
there's a game for everybody. I mean, we talked about the fighting games just a little bit before, and guess what? What's one of the biggest esports fighting games there is? Street Fighter.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good point about the fans, though, because it really is like the fan response to any of these is really what makes it what it is. I mean, you can have people playing, but if they don't play in front of anybody, does it really happen? Probably, but
are these people even real?
No, but the fans are what kind of drives sports, right? All sports. That's really what it is. It's about getting people to watch and enjoy the exhibition of it, and you can do that whether it be a physical, game of football or hockey or whatever, or if it's a virtual game, you can still do that. This thing that I started us off with this talk about the simulated hockey game. In the comments, in the chat, people were all talking about the Jets and how much they missed the team in the old days, and lots of people reminiscing about watching the legend players play when they were on and that kind of stuff. And there's a great sense of community there, and I think that's what you get out of all of these, no matter whether it's esports or quote unquote real sports. You get that sense of community from other fans of the same thing.
I just want to say, go Blackhawks.
That's fine.
Go Stars.
The captain of the captain of the Blackhawks is from Winnipeg, so you're welcome.
As if somehow you had something to do with that.
And if for any reason, my old friend Jamie Langenbrunner from if Langenbrunner is still out there listening to this, Langenbrunner, I miss you. I wish we were back at Macaroni Grill having a 2 entree lunch, bro. Langenbrunner was the best.
I love that guy. He's awesome.
I wish they still had fights this game so I could bitch slap Wayne. Wait a minute, I'm fighting anymore? Oh, doesn't that suck? Why'd they get rid of the fighting? It's the best part of the old version.
I think kids were hitting each other or something, man.
Yeah, but you know what, Mike? You can make their heads bleed on this one.
Make somebody's head bleed. Oh, we're in playoffs.
I'm gonna make Wayne Gretzky's head bleed for super fan number 99 over here. There it is, Mikey. Check it out. His head's bleeding.
The last time we were talking about some old games, and kind of sparked a memory that I really hadn't played this game in a long time. So I went out to GOG, Steam's competitor, and I went out and picked up Dungeon Keeper. It was like $1.49. It was on sale, so nice and cheap. And I hadn't played it in years. I downloaded that, and I was playing that just before we came onto the podcast. I've actually been playing it for a little bit from last night and a little bit today. And man, I just picked it right back up again. For those of you that aren't familiar with Dungeon Keeper, because I know it's a little bit more obscure, it was made back in 1997. Developed by Bullfrog Productions. They're the same developers that made Populous and Syndicate.
I remember
both of those
Syndicate.
series. Yeah. The main guy, the kind of the visionary for this, and I know Smitty's going to beat me up about how I say this, but Peter Molyneux. Molyneux. Yeah, I know it's something like that. I've never personally met the guy, but I have a hunch you might have.
Yep.
That guy had some tremendous brain power for these things. He made the Fable series.
Oh,
He
wow.
was, into that. Black and White.
Black and White.
Yeah.
Which, man, if you were kicking it around that time, that was that game visually, but the concept of Black and White was next level. This guy's got a great brain for that kind of thing. Oh God, yeah, does he ever?
Think about what some of those games are. So Dungeon Keeper is you are the Dungeon Keeper. You're the god that's manning the dungeon, and so it's a real-time simulation of you being the Dungeon Keeper. You've got a bunch of space, a bunch of imps, and literally in the game, you are the hand that can pick up the imps, smack them. You can right-click on them and smack them around, which, by the way, makes them pissed off, but they work faster.
And that same concept, by the way, goes right into Black and White. with the hand.
It's so great to see how that works, and you build treasure rooms and hatcheries and living quarters for your dungeon creatures. Eventually, if you do this right and you gain enough treasure and you build a training room, you can build a library and get some wizards that are there, and they attract more. All these things attract more and more creatures, and then eventually the good guys come knocking, and they'll start banging on your walls and trying to break into your dungeon, which is really great. There's actually a sequel as well, Dungeon Keeper 2. Both games play very similarly. Dungeon Keeper 2 came out a little bit afterwards, like I think it's a couple of years afterwards. But what I found most interesting was a lot of these older games, many of them you can find on Steam and GOG, and some of them use DOSBox, which is basically DOS emulation, to run that stuff in a modern setting. So you can just go out, purchase the game, download it, install it, and it's as if you are sitting in front of your old school CRT, right, with your beige box on your desk, and you're playing this old game, from 20, 30 years ago. And
no space, takes up no space. 281 megabytes I see here, which is like nothing. Yeah. Back then, that was a big deal.
It was back then, yeah.
But wasn't there something about Dungeon Keeper, Eric, about they had an increased audio field or something like that? And if you had one of the really cool sound cards or something, you could do, I'm going to say 3D sound, but it's called not ambient,
I think Creative had an audio mode that did
Sound
that.
Blaster.
Yeah.
Sound Blaster. Because remember, Eclipse had some PC speakers out around that time too, where they had rear speakers.
Yeah.
And I think several of them, like you said, Creative did. And anyway, I thought there was also some other technological advances with this game that involved the audio around it as well as the gameplay for some reason.
Yeah, there's and that game has some amazing sound. One of the things that is really good about this, I think I even mentioned it before, is the mentor. The voice of the game is this great voice actor, Richard Ridings, and he's got these wonderful sound clips that back in the day were so good.
Are you sure you haven't been playing Populous? Keeper, your dungeon is emptier than your head. Trick or treat, Keeper.
He ended up releasing a sound pack that could replace your system sounds on Windows. So when you logged into AOL, instead of getting the "You've Got Mail," it would come up with his voice and go, "New mail has arrived." And then you've got his voice doing those kinds of things. They had just this great ambiance in this game, but really Peter's brain for creating just amazing concepts and putting that into something you can play. That's almost the best part of all of this is you have somebody who really was a high talent, and he's been in the gaming industry for decades.
Yeah, and the character design on that game was done by an artist named Mark Healy, and Mark Healy went on to found a company which made a game called Little Big Planet.
Yeah.
So
very good, so very good.
Mark Healy went on. I think he was co-founded Media Molecule. So anyway, just once again, if you dig into some of these old games, you will realize, or older games, that oh my gosh, the talent, just the talent we had at Terminal Reality, and we were all in awe of Peter Molyneux or Molyneux. How did you say it? I can't remember.
Molyneux.
But and he's English, so I'm not even trying to be rude here. But so anyway, it's the great talent.
Yeah, I really appreciate a lot of those older games and picking up the mouse again for those. I actually pulled down a few other really good classics. I know we were talking about some of the old GTA games, and I saw those on there too. Some of the first couple of those that were the top down. But to the creativity because of the limitations. That's something that we don't have to deal with as much anymore. In your mind's eye, if you want something to appear on screen, as long as you've got the talent and the artistry to make that kind of thing happen, you can pretty much make it look however you want. Yeah. But that wasn't the case back then. That wasn't, It wasn't, we had so many limitations on the machine's capabilities, the program capabilities. The game engines weren't what they are today. And yet, with those limitations, some truly amazing games were able to be made and released. And it really set the pace and tone for what modern gaming is. It's just something that when you revisit it today, you can certainly see the fruits of that in what we have now.
Well, I'm just going to say it. Minecraft is a level editor. That's all Minecraft is. It's just a level editor. Like, this is what we would have made, a tool like this. So Peter, Molyneux, Terminal Reality, anybody else, I mean, current developers, they we all made our own tools back then to do things, but level editors were one of the main things that we had to build for ourselves, to be able to have this shared cooperative, creative collaboration here. And man, that was amazing. My mother would be so proud of me on that string of words. But it was like Minecraft when it came out. The thing that resonated with me, my daughter and I added it up, and I think she and I played over 700 hours of Minecraft, probably within just the first 6 months that it came out. We're playing on Xbox 360, and because we could play co-op with each other, we could go into Sandbox and just have fun and just
build whatever you want, do whatever you want.
And that's what I realized. I don't think I would have appreciated Minecraft as much if I didn't have a child to experience it with, because she was totally unjaded in any way. This was completely a literal sandbox for her to play in. She had no preconceptions of what any of this is. And to her, it was just endless open world exploration, building opportunities with no consequence. Once you weren't playing the game, you were just playing sound. And so I think there was so many ideas that were new in 1997 when Dungeon Keeper was out, and those same ideas are still new today. It's just we have, like you said, different tools to enable that vision to come to life. And so kudos to everybody in this amazing industry that has worked their booties off to make things as cool as they are today. And I can't wait to see what tomorrow brings.
Yeah, imagine 10 years from now. I mean, or if we're talking 1997, imagine 23 years from now.
We're all just going to have chips in our heads, sitting still, communicating with each other without moving.
Yeah, I hope so.
I just wanted to ask you, Eric, I am, I really like to show my kids older games and kind of teach them the value of them. They sometimes roll their eyes and get, the graphics are so bad or whatever. They get worked up on that. So I try to find the really good games. And this looks like a good game, Dungeon Keeper, but is it appropriate for my children? I wonder if it's, it says mature, but that's 1997 mature.
I was going to say it's pretty tame nowadays, but I think maybe back in the day it might have been just a little bit on the edge.
I see there is a torture chamber in this game.
It's not what you think.
Not 50 Shades of Grey. It's not that kind of torture chamber.
No, definitely not. Definitely not. But very fun game, very fun set of games, to be honest. Both of them are great, and they're definitely classics that I recommend. Well, it looks like we are out of lives. For Games You Deserve, I am Eric.
I'm Smitty.
And I'm Dan.
That is it. Thank you for listening.
Game over.